apologies for the long delay on this. Unfortunately, I got sick about a week ago after coming home from the dentist, on the way home, really. And I've been well enough that in the previous period I would have played and probably been coughing and snuffling and cursing and all that. I'm still a little sick, but I'm beginning to feel better in the sense that I can do okay, which means on with 1918. I also learned something about my camera. I think I understand why it has a button to turn it on and off rather than relying on flipping the screen out. Flipping the screen out probably added to the complexity of the JVC over there. Yeah, that's my stereo as well. And that screen, those screens tended to degrade pretty quickly. I don't know. I mean, that one lasted quite a while, honestly, but that's always been the failure point, the final failure point for those. And maybe this one's a little sturdier because they didn't have to put as much complexity in it. Okay, so let's see if I can remember how to play. Yeah, I've got a sequence of play somewhere. Yep, I'm going to be drawing a German event card. And in this case, phosgene gas. I thought I used this already. Maybe the Allies did. So I'll get a gas. And I'm making sure. There's so much going on. But yeah, I get a gas card available basically from that. An exceedingly limited attack into Bavaria. There was some chance that could succeed. But the problem is, we only have like 5 production points coming to us from Hanover and Berlin. We have more than that in damage already. So I don't know how I want to do this, but about 3, 4, 5. This is healed. These are automatically healed. The planes, I think I actually have to make a dogfight roll. And I get the Strasstruppen, finally. The Strasstruppen unit goes in any land-supplied area containing a German army. You may roll dice twice when attacking and advance with attacking armies. But it gets used once. Remove unit after combat resolution. Redeploy in movement phase, though. It comes back. Okay. So, it's just something I get to keep using. I'm liable to make the attack out of Hanover again, if that happens. The poison gas will be available next turn. It's the only card remaining. And I got the dogfight check. I don't remember how to do those. It's been a while, right? But it's not too hard. It's hard to find shit. 1 die for each level of P technology that they have in play. Germans get 3 dice. I do not have the Red Baron anymore. No, I still do. So that's a 4th die. And the Allies only have 1 level of P. So let's see. The highest value thrown is air superiority. So I have a 5. And the Allies get a 3. So I only get 2 of my planes. Which means one of them comes back. I don't know where to put it. I can put it over on the planes. That'll help remind me when I'm doing the dogfights. It could go in the marker box, but yeah, I'm okay splitting them this way. And that puts me on the Western Allies. Mustard gas. So we get a gas, and again, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have to put a little bit more thought, but not as much thought as I had to, except I fucking forgot him. Not as much thought as I put early in the game. Okay, so the guerrillas would have done something. And I don't have to use them as guerrillas, but I want to. Not as much thought as I would have had to use early in the game, but more than maybe I have to on turns normally, although there's very little to do for the Germans. Allies basically failed to do anything, even with all the points that the U.S. is sending them. They just don't have enough troops to have an oomph to push through in the end, which is kind of interesting. It makes sense. There's such a heavy concentration of Germans in these spaces, especially here, that it's very hard, where the Allies have 3 spaces exposed, so they have to provide some sort of defense. It's kind of hard to do anything to dislodge them there. The Russians may have a little bit better chance, because they have all their force on one, point, basically. Yeah, sure, they got some, but, and it's the important one to boot, which is kind of an interesting factor. But it shows something that kind of isn't accurate. Once the German army collapsed in the way that it kind of has here, issues of national will would come into play, and Germany would just kind of fall apart. And it's why, if you get to this kind of situation, you're probably doing more historical favor to yourself by surrendering than anything else. Let's check their technology card. Synchronized machine guns. That gives us a second plane. I believe we get another airplane for that. Yeah. We get a second marker. Let's get that here. And now they've got 2 versus 4. At this point, I've actually got enough planes that I could conceivably defeat. I could shoot down the Red Baron. It's on doubles, I believe. But I do not get doubles. I do get a 5, however, which is a pretty good roll, but not enough to give me any markers. But I may be able to prevent air superiority markers from the Germans, if I'm getting good rolls, etc. And that puts us to the U.S. Russian Civil War. Treaty of Brest-Litovsk not yet signed. If the Central Powers control 4 or more areas in Russia, and Russia does not control any Central Powers area, the treaty is signed and Russia collapses. If neither of these exist, place the revolutionary turmoil marker on the board if not already placed. Well, that doesn't sound like anything. Put that there. Doesn't sound like it does shit. I don't think there's any special rules on it. There may be another card which has an effect on that, but yeah. That's all I'm assuming there. So there's no easy out there either. And where are we? Well, I mean, the U.S. can't do much except supply money and defensive forces. They just don't have enough pieces. They have a total of 3 pieces. That's not enough to push anywhere on the line. I mean, maybe in a secondary theater or something. But unless I could get the forces in with the Russians, and then they could cooperate, strangely. And the Russians don't do much better. They do manage to damage a couple of German units, but it doesn't really matter. They had less options. The Western Allies actually launched an attack into Austria, which could have had some effect. If they take Austria, they cut these guys off, make them unable to be supplied, and make them kind of troubled. It doesn't immediately destroy them or anything. It just means they can't recuperate. But it would have spread, Allied defenses pretty thin for the German attack, because you don't get a reposition after your attack. You don't get to really consolidate things. So unless you're attacking to shorten the front, if you end up attacking to broaden the front, as this would, it can cause issues unless you prepare for it by moving extra units in. And this was not my primary attack. It was just a matter of, hey, I got some extra points. Obviously, I would want to take that production away from the Austrians. However, that would cause some issues. So that looks like the end of the line. We've pushed money out to everyone. We've rebuilt everything we can. The U.S. troops are pretty much useless on the offensive, like I said, unless there's, like a sole German unit or something. Maybe they can break through. And that brings us to the final event of the turn, which is Wandergoltz. Place on a Turkish army, gives 2 extra attack dice. Well, on the negative side, the Turks are not really capable of attacking. I mean, I guess we could hit into Bulgaria. What would that do for us? Nothing. Allenby only helps attacks. You know what? I'm going to put him in Jerusalem. But we got to rebuild the Turkish army, and we don't have enough points to do so. We might lose Baghdad this next turn. Baghdad's the better place to lose because the Allies have to pay more to recuperate this route if they're not actually in Basra. On the other hand, they've got more money than they know what to do with it at this point. I mean, basically, they can do attritional attacks, but those attritional attacks are really butt kiss, except for from here where they can actually take something. The Russians, they're not able to rebuild all their forces, so they're kind of stretched where they are, which is why you don't see attacks from cars happening, but you do see attacks from the Brits happening into there. I might make an attack here, because if I can win in Italy, that at least takes something out of my hands, and it opens up a threat into France and everything. Problem is, there's really nothing of value to be gained. I mean, here, this attack would be, if I could succeed with that, that would be great. It didn't happen. That's what the Turks are rebuilding, but they'll just keep getting hit because the Western Allies don't care. I put an extra piece in here because there was some possibility I could take northern Italy, but as soon as that possibility was gone, I gave up the attack when I could actually be hitting Italian units. Now the Italians are going to be able to build another unit with the points they have, but the thing is, the Austrians are also, this was a threat, so I wanted to rebuild this. I'm not really worried about Bohemia, Galicia. The Russians are not focusing on, so I don't see that as likely to fall. If they wanted to divert troops that are fresh troops to attack it, they could take it, probably. It's not even obvious that they could. But, they're going for the main goal of the game instead. Again, nothing's in question here. The game's over in terms of victory points, etc. There's no way the Central Powers can possibly win. They're at negative victory points. They need to be at +7. But on the other hand, there's also, I think, no way to force them into an ultimate surrender. I thought they were going to be able. I thought Berlin was going to be able to be entered. I'm not so sure anymore. It just, and denser the German force becomes, the less likely they're going to lose anything. I really think I should just call it for the sake of sanity. But we got this close, and it does kind of decrease my willingness to keep going, though. I'm going to go down and play my computer game that I, of course, got addicted to while I was sick. If that's the case, well, But where am I going to go other than, it's not like I'm going to start another game when I'm addicted to a computer game. Or if I am, I'm not going to be gung-ho about it the way I should. So I guess it doesn't hurt either way. Okay, scoot up there. Let me place a couple things. The Germans drew the Allied naval blockade. That's going to take 2 PPs away from them during production, which I've already done. But given that, they wanted to use their Strasstruppen, so they launched a couple of attacks, ended up tiring a unit, and they couldn't rebuild everything because of it. In addition, they almost got the Red Baron shot down. There were doubles, but it was double 3s, which isn't above the current air technology for the Germans. So no issue there. And they didn't get anywhere. They were trying to hit Bavaria. If they could have gotten lucky. But they ended up actually not getting any air support as well, which kind of hurts. And now they get their last tech card, which I think is another poison gas. So they'll have a reason to attack next turn. Because next turn is the last turn, they're not going to be charged for the fact that this is their last tech card. They've generated a lot of technology, unlike the Entente, but it hasn't made up for whatever mistakes I made early in that initial. I'm not pushing into the Somme, I think, we'll draw the Western Allied card. The old Contemptibles, placed on the British First Army BEF. It gets to reroll. Well, this is actually not an acceptable card. I think it just gets discarded for no effect. I'm not going to even look it up. It's just not worth, I mean, at this point, the game is pretty much decided. I don't think anybody's going to get into Berlin, and Germany's not going to surrender before the end of the game because they cannot, unless you take Berlin, which it just feels a little false to me. Of course, the players can make that choice, and in this case, they should have. And we'll see what the Western Allies can do. And the Western Allies launched a major attack here, which didn't do much. We're doing some attritional damage with the Russians coming in too. It may be that the Germans, with their low recuperation capability, are going to be in a lot of trouble. But that one card, that was a one-season card. It cost them 2 production. They're not, they're normally going to be getting 5, so it's not really moving anywhere. We're not able to budge them here. We launched another attack down here just because, hey, we got lots of points. We attacked all over everywhere. You can see we took Baghdad, paid the $2 to recuperate there, and we damaged, what's his name? I can't even remember who he is. We don't have a card for him. But the German troops down here, do they have his name on it? Yeah, they do. Lestau Vorbeck, the Afrikaner. Well, he's not. He's German East African. But we actually got an Air Force unit, which we're going to use to protect Belgium. Had more production than we could use. The Italians built another army, hopes that maybe someday it'll be useful. At the very least, it provides more defense. And what we have not drawn is the tech card. We still haven't seen tanks yet. And they're a long way away, though. Royal Air Force created an extra die, or an extra potential Air Force, and an extra die in the dogfights. So, things, the predominance of the air power has shifted away. But we're not really seeing the kind of power that we feel like we need to punch through. And there's only one more turn left. That brings us to the Eastern Entente, Romanian war effort. If Romania has joined the war and has not been conquered, it certainly has been conquered, so there's a card that's gone. And again, the U.S. really is kind of incapable of doing anything except providing lots of money, more money than the Allies need. They don't have enough armies in position. The front's too broad, so an attack from here, it just doesn't do anything. If I could get into Hanover, then I could focus all of my force against Berlin, and between them and the Russians, we would get in. But the way things are, I don't know if we would, because there'd be so many German armies there, but the production would be reduced. So, not seeing a lot there. And no go there either. The Russians took the trenches down, but didn't get a single hit beyond that. And using their artillery, etc. Out of frustration, we attacked down here, but Ataturk whooped our ass. I keep forgetting about these. The Western Allies can use that. That's like an extra die or something, I think. Somewhere. Arab Revolt. Let's put this over here. Yeah, they get to roll an extra die on their first attack. Keep forgetting to do that, but not going to make that big a difference. Although if we do manage to get a chain going up to Russia, the U.S. can start shifting money into Russia coming through Basra, which would be helpful. Because the Russians have perhaps one of the best routes forward. What is this central power starvation thing? What the hell? I don't know, I've been forgetting about that. Forgot about the -2. Oh no, the marker gets removed. Yeah. After the... Yeah, that should be gone. And now this goes away. As you can see, things don't have most of these don't have a lasting effect. It's just like, hey, yeah, it was bad this turn. You know, I don't even know if I had that in play, which might have meant something, but I doubt it. That would have prevented German attacks that haven't been successful or useful for the most part. And now I guess we go to the last event of this month. Shell shock. All Austrian heavy artillery attacks this turn have an automatic die roll of 6. Well, that's interesting, because you get an extra die. That's going to ensure that I could make some ground. I can't really shift them here. There's not enough oomph here to break into Bavaria or anything. So yeah, that's, and I'm not sure I'm allowed to attack into Bavaria actually, because of the restrictions. The Austrians aren't supposed to be allowed to move there. I think they can attack into it. They just can't transfer forces for the defense essentially. And then once they're in there, they're allowed to leave, but give me some shot there, but not much. I don't have enough troops to really break through. And not a hell of a lot came out of the shell shock. Yeah, we did some damage, but who cares? As long as these forces aren't attacking, and they're outnumbered, so there's not much point. There's not much value to whatever the Austrians are doing there. They're just doing an attrition that doesn't even matter because the U.S. money is flowing in at such a high rate. On the Turkish side, I had the von Sanders piece. I was using the von der Goltz rule from his card, but I just grabbed the wrong piece. Now I switched to the von der Goltz. He succeeded in hitting the Sinai, and I recuperated him. Instead of here, this is somewhat of a danger because the Allies could make their way up into Turkey, into Anatolia itself, which of course would be the surrender of Turkey and money going through to the Russians and all. But I felt like, hey, it's worth taking a chance to try to knock this shit out and see if we can fix things. Of course, the Brits are going to rebuild Sinai. It's not going to make a damn bit of difference. It was kind of a mistake to do that. And what else? I mean, there's just not enough money, or there's too much money on the Entente side for anything to really change. And that's going to throw us into the autumn of 18. And this is the last turn. We'll play it out, but it really is kind of pointless. So the Germans managed, well, first of all, Lenin Bolsheviks rise. This means at any point for the rest of the game, if the Germans have 4 or more areas in Russia, well, if the Central Powers does, then the full Russian surrender happens. However, that's not going to happen, so we can just ignore that. As long as the revolutionary turmoil was out, this becomes triggered then and makes it a worse scenario for them. The Germans managed to succeed in taking Bavaria finally, pushing the French back. That gave them a little bit more production, so they were able to rebuild almost everything. Again, doesn't make much difference, to tell you the truth. And we'll draw the Western Allies card. Oh, the Red Baron got shut down. Yeah. Hope Richthofen's war goes down fast in in Mr. Roberts' Avalon Hill challenge. It usually lasts way too long for such a crappy game. And the Germans did not get any planes. Now, it's a Western Allied shell shock, which will give them automatic rolls of 6. Now, what's cool about this is you don't even have to roll. So all you do is spend the artillery and you win a battle, which could be pretty cool. We're probably going to see at least one more unit go into here. Probably swap the French unit in and out just to give me a little bit more punch to go through and see if maybe we can take Hanover. And the Western Allies made it into Hanover. It's not going to matter. The Germans aren't going to get another turn. But if they did, they would still get the Bavarian production, even though it's cut off, and could still use it for things in Berlin. It's just kind of weird. I mean, or likewise, they could use Berlin points in Bavaria. There's no sense of supply within your own country. Where else? They did not succeed in pushing the East Africans, and this they had to rebuild. They did take Mosul, though, which means we're now in Anatolia, and I think it's time to draw our card. It's a poison gas card, which we're not going to get to use. We can get an air power roll. We get 3 dice. We get a 5 versus only 3 German dice as well. Red Baron's gone. A 5. We lose our plane. Okay. And puts it over to the Russians, who could actually take Berlin on the last turn. And for what that's worth. If they don't take Berlin, it's actually possible that the Austrians could force a Russian surrender, I think, in conjunction with the Turks. Assuming Kars as a box counts as part of Russia. We get a Russian shell shock card. Geez, these are all coming out at the same time. Well, they're all 1918 cards. That's why. That's very likely to punch its way into Berlin now. So, as far as I'm concerned, the war is probably over. And to try to manufacture some sort of excitement, the German army is completely down. There's no way they can do none shall pass, or they shall not pass. The Russians have used up all their artillery. They still have a +1. The Germans have used up all theirs. Their trenches are gone and everything. And it's down to 1 die roll whether or not Berlin falls here, which is kind of exciting. And it does. Attacker always wins ties. The Germans have nowhere to go, so their entire army is destroyed. Their country hasn't surrendered officially. But as soon as I clean that up, we'll go and see if Austria can knock Russia out of the war with the revolution. Okay, so here's our situation. The Russians have built up their forces in Berlin so that the Austrians can't take that easily. I forgot about the U.S. The U.S. rebuilds its troops and throws money all kind of places. But the Russians have also built up their forces at Brest-Litovsk, Ukraine, and in Kars. Remember, they still have their 5 production. You know, nothing's taken away from them. Although it's hard to take their production, actually. So there's one Russian area that's been captured, which is Poland. It would be impossible to take this. The Austrians could conceivably move 2 units up here and attack one of these 2, but it's not going to... The most they can do is take 1 space. So what we're looking at is 2 Russian spaces max. Given that Berlin just fell, let's see what the Central Allies card is. It is Von Sanders, which will give the Turks a +1 DRM in a combat in a square area. So I can like throw that here and make it have 2 commanders here and make it possible that Kars could fall. but it couldn't. It just they would. What would happen is the best that could happen is this is expended and this is expended, and you're stuck at an even point. So at this point, I'm just going to call it. Finally, I don't feel like playing out an Austrian turn that can't do anything. But the impressive thing is Austria is in much, much better shape than the Russians are. One thing about the Austrians, their shell shock card isn't as powerful as everyone else's because they have that -1 DRM from being a corpse. Anyway, that's the full playthrough there. What can I say? You know, it felt like the Central Powers had a harder time than I expected of them. And the only thing that I can really trigger that to is not managing to take the Somme in the first turn. There's nothing else that really felt like it was going against them heavily. In fact, they got their technology quicker than the Allies did. Maybe die rolls and stuff at other places. Their submarines were working okay. Yes, they didn't blow through the blockade. Oh well, you know, I mean, how likely is that? Later in the game, did I focus too much on trying to take Paris? Because I did take that shot at Paris, and that might have prevented an earlier Russian collapse. But things were bad enough by that point that it seemed pretty clear that it had to be sort of that automatic victory. And to me, that was Der Kaiserschlacht happening at a year early, basically. Not quite a year. I think it was late in 17 that it happened. But by that point, it was the writing was on the wall. There was no way that the Germans were going to win just by knocking Russia out. And only the automatic victory was going to get them the positioning. Victory point-wise, what are there? Well, it's, I think, just production areas that count, if I recall correctly. Actually, this is not an automatic victory, so it would go to the victory condition step. Let's see what we've got. Each enemy home area and each square production area controlled by his alliance. Okay, so the Allies have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas that they've taken from the Germans. And the Austrians took 1. The Germans took 1 here. So we're at kind of a 3-point difference. Nothing in Turkey has actually fallen. So yeah, we're looking at like negative 3 points in favor of the Western Allies. Now you might say, well, that doesn't end up that far. It looks really horrible. Yeah, the Central Powers have to have 7 points in their advantage for the game to be won, which is pretty easy. Is that even right? For each enemy home area. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. So what would a German victory look like? I mean, they can get a lot of points out of Russia. And if they're established in the Somme as well, it's probably pretty close. I mean, historically, what are we talking about? 1, 2. Yeah, I don't know. But I came out with something that was not at all historical from it. So, I don't know. I'll come back with a review. I'm left with kind of a feeling of I'm a little stunned by how far it kind of swung, and then also by how the late war, primarily because all the German forces were conglomerated in one little area, became something that it was really hard to budge them, which again, that doesn't feel correct. You know, for most of the game, things felt pretty good, but then late, as I got down to just 2 German areas, there's just too much German production. They can keep rebuilding whatever gets taken from them, so it's almost impossible to force them to surrender. In which case, you know, this becomes the determining end game, kind of no matter what. So I don't know. I have definite mixed feelings at this point, but I'll come back with the review. Let's send this up first.